Hello. We get to sit down, which is nice. Shall I tell a funny story? When I first I shared in front of a crowd. It was at GWS, wasn't it? And we were doing an evening, and I was standing down the front. Everybody else stood up, and they were clapping, and it was lovely. And Allan's in the front row going, so I went, oh, you want me to sit down? So I sat down, and I was the one that was leading. And everybody else was just left standing, and he's going, oh, sorry, you're supposed to sit down as well. That's what nerves is. That's what happens when you're nervous. All right, well, thank you. Thank you for coming. I'm going to kind of lead it a little bit, but Allan and I are going to do a little bit of, hopefully, banter, like Scottish banter. Have you heard of Scottish banter before? So we'll get some Scottish banter, hopefully. We might open up a little bit about some of our crazy past and some of our stories and how learning about marriage and relationships and everything in our... How long have we known each other? 30 years now, almost. We're coming up for 23 years married. We have 3 children, 2 grown up. Well, actually, they're all grown up. The 2 oldest ones, they're in their 30s. The youngest one's 22. So she's still our baby, really, and she still lives at home. And we have a dog. And a fur baby, yeah. Our 2 older kids, I was married before. So was married before, didn't work out too well, unfortunately. At that time, it was a bit of a crazy time. Before I was a Christian, then I got saved, and I met Allan, and then got remarried. So there's a bit of story there when you think about blended marriage as well. I don't know if anyone here tonight has been remarried, understands that can bring complexities as well to relationships. So we're looking at all relationships tonight. We're not just looking at marriage. So... do you want to say something? Introduce something about yourself? Or?
Yeah, well, my name's Allan. First of all, I want to say thanks to Tom and Angela for trusting us here with 2 microphones. I think that's a big trust statement there. And yeah, we're just so happy to be here. We've got heaps of stories to tell. And hopefully, at the end of the night, when you walk out, everybody will walk out with one thing that they can take home and go, wow, I'm glad I came just for that one thing. Yeah.
So we're going to go into the first slide, and we'll talk a bit more about some of our experience as well as we go on. We're going to talk first, we're going to look at the icebreaker, and that's in slide 2. So I think, the icebreaker activity. And from what you can see, what is the best or the worst relationship advice you've ever received? Now, this is talking, I know some of you here today or tonight, you might be married, you might not be married, you might be with your boyfriend, girlfriend, you might be single, you might be looking at someone and thinking about them and going, hopefully I'll be in a relationship soon. So whatever relationship status you are, you could be thinking about, well, my work relationship's pretty tough at the moment. So it's like thinking about that too. We're not just looking at marriage, I think. I've probably said that a few times now. So shout out. Let's hear from you. Or actually give you a couple of minutes just to talk amongst yourselves in your couples or in your groups and think about what are some of the best or worst marriage tips, relationship advice you've ever had for marriage or relationship or friendship or whatever. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then we'll get you to feedback and tell us. All right. Have you got some advice that you want to share? You want to share? I think we'll do the microphone.
And so, hey everyone. So, the worst relationship advice I ever got was actually probably not getting any until after I was married. If that kind of counts, it's like, there's a lot of things in life they don't teach you. They don't teach you relationships. They don't teach you financial advice. You do math at school or whatever, right? And the best relationship I ever got after I was married, which I'm not anymore, pray together daily.
Good. Very good. Anyone else? Let's see. Angela.
Okay, so I got thrown in the bus. But I was talking about friendships. My mom used to always say, make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other is gold.
Beautiful, beautiful. Have we got one more? Come on, we must have one more. Byron, you must have something. Have we got some bad advice?
Yeah, that's what I said. That was mine.
I'm not going to say that.
That's tongue in cheek.
I guess the best advice would be marry your best friend.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, that's so good. So lovely. Allan, have you got some good advice or bad advice?
Well, I think the best advice I ever got was to fight for date night. And when you've got a young family, it's a real fight. It's a real thing. Our date night in Scotland was leaving the house and going to McDonald's, getting 2 coffees, and then driving like 2 minutes to the sea where we lived, sitting in the car park, having our coffees, and then go back to the house. And that's all the time we could afford to be away without the house being burned down or something happening. But we made it happen every single week. And we know that if we hadn't fought for date night, our marriage wouldn't have been the same. Yeah.
And what was the bad advice?
The worst advice I ever got was not to get married. Yeah. I thought
He was advised not to get married, wasn't it? Yeah.
I thought, no, I'm disregarding that.
Good work. That was a good answer, Allan. All right, can we go to slide number 3? So what makes marriages or relationships work? So we've got the list here from, we're actually taking some stuff from the Gottman 7 Principles of Marriage. And we're not using it all, but we are referencing some of their stuff because obviously we do this at night school, the 7 Principles of Marriage, but it's relationship. It's not just marriage. I'm really keen to stress that it's not just about marriages. I think about every relationship. Are you going to say something?
I was just going to say the principles for relationship are really universal.
Yeah.
So if it works in a marriage, it works in business, it works everywhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. So what makes marriage relationships work? So we've got a few things here, but I want Allan to tell a story first because deep friendships and marriages are important. Happy marriages and relationships are based on solid friendship and trust. Okay, over to you, Allan. Do you notice I highlight trust there? Okay.
I don't really want to tell this story, but I will. Yeah. So it goes back to the early days when we were just married. Wendy was working as a nurse and she was on a night shift or something. And I thought, I know what I could do to bless. I'll clean the house. I'll vacuum, I'll clean the bathrooms, the toilets, I'll do everything. So when she comes home in the morning, the place is just looking spotless. So I got on with that in amongst with the 3 kids. But got it done, but on the journey, there was a glass swan ornament, knocked it off the shelf and broke its neck. And then I thought, this is really going to spoil the effect of all the cleaning I've done. And I'm not going to get the brownie points I'm hoping for if I confess that I've broken an ornament. So I wrapped it up carefully in some tissue, put it in the bin, and went, it'll be okay. And then so it was okay. Weeks went by and everything was okay. We were having a great life, enjoying where we were. And then one day I heard this voice from the bedroom going, Allan, do you know where my glass swan is? It's the last thing I've got of my granny's. Well, I did what any good Christian man would do, and I helped Wendy look for her glass swan.
Remember I said trust. Keep going.
I was a bit
It gets worse.
Yeah, well, surprisingly, we didn't find it. I looked under the bed, I kind of looked everywhere, and I did mention that Rachel, our youngest, had been in the room at some point. I was really squirming.
Tried to blame Rachel.
I didn't,
Yeah.
well, in fair, yeah. I think blame's too strong. Yeah. Anyway, didn't sleep for 2 nights, and then finally told Wendy, I have to tell you something. It was me, I broke your glass swan. And she just started laughing.
Yeah. I could see the pain he was going through, so I felt he suffered enough. So deep friendship, deep trust is a good relationship. And again, thinking about all our relationships. The Sound Relationship House, it's like getting to know each other helps deepen relationships. So you're seeing on the screen there's 7 principles, and we're going to work our way through these tonight. So, but what we're going to go on to next, in the next slide, we're looking at the 4 horsemen. Now, before we go into the 7 principles, we want to talk about the 4 horsemen. The 4 horsemen, maybe you could just do a quick introduction, and I'll go through.
Yeah, okay. So the 4 horsemen really are, right, so Gottman do a lot of research on marriage. For the last 30 years, they've done nothing but research on marriage. So it's Jack and Julie Gottman. They are from a Judaist background, and John and Julie Gottman. And they're really recognized as world leaders in the research on marriage. They actually have done a lot of work on physiology, watching what happens when couples are in a disagreement. They have rooms set up in the university where couples come and stay, and they film their conversations. They record different things that are their blood and their heart and all that is going on while they're having these discussions. So they've really kind of like unpacked marriage. And when we look at the principles, now I wouldn't say we agree with all their ideology that they carry as people, as an organization, but when we look at the principles they built for marriage, we can see they're actually built on biblical truths. So we're quite happy to sit in that space and go through those. Yeah. And these 4 horsemen is what they've recognized, that if they see them in a marriage, they're strong predictors, or even in a relationship, they're strong predictors that relationship isn't going to survive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And on the screen, we've got the 4 horsemen, and each one, criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. We're just going to quickly explain them, but we're going to show a little clip, a little film from YouTube after this. And it helps you understand it a bit more. But what they're saying is the predictors of divorce or just relationship breakdown. So even like thinking of your friends, it's like if you're showing signs of any of these 4 horsemen in your communication, then there's a good chance that relationship's probably not going to last very long, because it's going to become quite tense and quite uncomfortable. So criticism, defensiveness, contempt. We were going to do it. Will we do a little role play, or will we just go straight into the film? Or
I'm happy to do a role play.
Okay, let's do a role play, because then this will show you a little bit. And I want you to see if you can pick out criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. Do you want to start?
Okay, you never help with the dishes.
I do so. I do it all the time. You're always sitting in the front room just watching TV. What are you turning away from me for? Oh, for goodness sake. Okay, what did you think of that? That was quite real life, actually. I hate to say. So, criticism. What do you think the criticism was there? You never.
You never. Universal statement.
Yeah. You never. And then the next one, defensiveness. Defensive. Was I a little bit defensive there?
Yeah, defensive when you came back and said, instead of saying, oh, what do you mean by never, or actually unpacking that, you said what I never did as well. Yeah. So there's that sense of you're immediately defending yourself.
I was defending myself. And then the contempt was a bit of the rolling of the eyes and, whatever, that kind of response as well. But the stonewalling is one, we didn't really go into that, but stonewalling is kind of when there's a lot going on and the one person in the conversation is gone, basically. They're there, but they're gone. They're not listening to a word you're saying. You could be saying all these things to them and they've gone. They're not tuning in. And actually what that can lead to as well is in that kind of environment where there's a lot of tension. You've heard of the fight or flight, when things are actually starting to build up. That person possibly is either flooding, or one of you might start flooding. And your body is starting to go, panic, get me out of here, I don't like what's happening. So when there's that kind of reactions, the criticism, the defensiveness, or the contempt, then you're starting to feel your heart rate's going up. You're possibly starting to perspire a little bit. You're feeling yourself maybe shaking a little bit. And then sometimes for women, we can blurt out, and I'm speaking honestly about what I can be like sometimes. I can just blurt out everything I can think of. But with men, it's a little bit different, isn't it? Tell us about that, Allan.
So I think what research has shown, and it's a general picture, it's not 100%, But generally speaking, when men or women flood, the man tends to be able to only think about one thing. And it's often got nothing to do with what's going on at the moment. It's whatever's in his mind at that time. The woman is often able to remember everything connected to this event and is quite happy to tell everything connected to this event. And so that you can see how that, when the physiology is changing, blood temperature, the blood pressure, the heart, the breathing, everything's changing, that there's no rescue there. It's really time out is what's needed.
So what's happening is our adrenaline is actually building up, and we actually are going into fight or flight, because the flight in my way would be to leave the room, whereas the fight might be to go wah, 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 and get even deeper into it. So we'll talk a little bit more about this later, because we're going to work through the different principles. And in that, we're going to talk about gridlock and things like that. Let's have a look at the film. That's the next one. And it's American, so let's just watch it. And it's one that, it's good. It's good to watch, actually.
You're so selfish.
What an idiot.
It's not my fault we're always late.
Forget it.
Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Dr. John Gottman calls these negative communication patterns the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse because they'll lead to the end of your relationship. In fact, he can predict this relationship failure with over 90% accuracy if the behavior isn't changed. So, what can you do? Well, at the Gottman Institute, we understand you might not even know you're communicating this way, or you might not know how to control it. But if you practice the following 4 research-based antidotes, there is hope for your future. Criticism attacks the character of the recipient, instead of focusing on a specific behavior. The antidote to criticism is to talk about your feelings using I statements, then express a positive need. Contempt is an expression of superiority that comes out as sarcasm, cynicism, name-calling, eye-rolling, sneering, mockery, and hostile humor. Contempt is the greatest predictor of relationship failure and must be eliminated. The antidote to contempt is to treat one another with respect and build a culture of appreciation within the relationship. Defensiveness is self-protection through righteous indignation or playing the victim. Defensiveness never solves the problem and is really just an underhanded way of blaming your partner. The antidote to defensiveness is to accept responsibility, even if only for part of the conflict. Stonewalling occurs when the listener withdraws from the conversation without resolving anything. It takes time for the negativity created by the first 3 horsemen to result in stonewalling, but when it does, it can become a habit. The antidote to stonewalling is to break for at least 20 minutes, calm down, then return to the conversation. Spare your relationship from certain destruction. Learn more about eliminating the 4 horsemen by visiting our site.
That's great, thank you. So we're going to go on to the next slide, which is the predictors of relationship breakdown or divorce. So I'll just quickly go through them, because what I really want to focus is the principles, but this is like the kind of background behind it. So if we sort of understand the why, and then we can go on to the what can we do. So the predictors, so firstly, the first sign is the harsh startup. So it's like, how do we start the conversation? If somebody's if you're in that place where there's tension, you're having a conversation with someone, and then you immediately come in with a negative or accusatory statement, how do you think that's going to work out? Probably not too good. It's like, how are you going to start the conversation? Okay, we'll do another example.
Do an example of, so what's a harsh startup and what does a soft startup look like?
Yeah.
So a harsh startup would be what we said earlier. Like, you never help with the dishes. You never, that's that you and never, that universal thing together. And then if we think about Prepare and Enrich with a gentle startup, so we would, in pre-marriage, we would teach couples to, one person would be assertive and one person would practice reflective listening. And so one person would say what they want and how that would make them feel.
Yeah.
The other person listens and then reflects back to them what they've heard in their own words. And that changing it to their own words is really important because that allows So if it's for me and Wendy, we'll do an example that would make Wendy feel like she's understood. So we're not necessarily in agreement at this point, because if we're still in disagreement, we would go to conflict resolution. This is just understanding. So the first part is understanding. That's the principle that we need to get right. Often we get to conflict resolution and we don't have understanding. We actually haven't listened to each other.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll do an example.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So this is the gentle startup, and I'll be the assertive, and you're going to listen and reflect back.
Yeah.
So Wendy,
Yeah.
I would really love it, darling, if when we come home at night, you would make as much fuss of me as you do of the dog. It would make me feel like you love me at least as much as the dog.
Okay. Now, in my mind, I've got something I'd really like to say, but we're doing this as we're supposed to do it. Yes, Allan. I hear what you're saying. And what I think you're trying to say to me is when I come home at the end of the night, rather than running straight to the dog and hugging him, that I'll turn around and hug you and give you lots of cuddles, because I think it makes you feel like I really love you.
Yeah, that's great.
Is that okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Now, you see, all we've done there is gain understanding. We may not have agreement at this point.
Yeah. Can I just... No. My dog does run up to me as soon... Anyway, the dog. Oh, see? We're practicing. Okay. So the second sign is the 4 horsemen. So we've covered that, I think. We don't need to go back. But you just saw a little glimpse of it coming up there as well. The third sign is flooding. Have you heard of flooding? Hands up if you've heard of flooding. Yep. Anyone else? Flooding. Flooding's not like what happens when it rains a lot. Flooding happens when you're feeling a bit stressed and overwhelmed. And if you're having a really big argument or tension, or you're in a situation where somebody said something that makes you feel really uncomfortable or sad or just really freaks you or really annoys you, your body starts to change a little bit. You start, like Allan mentioned about the heart rate and everything else. And actually with flooding is, you're best not going any further at this point in the conversation, because it's going to go nowhere. You can keep talking to that person that's flooding, but they're not hearing you again. They're really needing time out. So what we recommend here is have a little, I need time out, have a break. And the body language is the 4th sign. Humor, yeah.
Humor can work.
We've got a little sort of thing when things are getting a bit tense. And it actually breaks the ice a little bit, because we stuck our tongues out, if you didn't notice it. But when you can feel the tension going up, and actually we're in a comfortable place that we can actually, when we stick our tongues out at each other, we're not going to lose it even more. There's a break in the ice there. There's a break in the tension, and I think that's what we're trying to encourage. Couples, friends, you can have fun with this. It's like there might be like sticking the tongue out or the T sign for time out. School teachers in the house, I'm sure that happens many's a time, but with your pupils. So it's just learn what suits you guys, what works for you. The next one, 5th sign, is failed repair attempts. They're difficult too, hey? I think I remember you're going to share something again, aren't you?
No, I'm just going to say often that is humor.
Yeah.
So one person will try to repair the damage by well-placed humor.
Yeah.
And if that's not received, then that's a failed repair attempt at that point. And that really makes it even trickier to get back on track.
Yeah. And the person is making, so a repair attempt is, there's something not right. There's tension. Maybe you're just not talking right now. So you maybe try and you might bring a coffee, or you might bring a nice cake or something. But the person is like, they don't really care. They make out they're not being very nice back, put it that way. So that might be a one-off. Maybe in an hour's time they're feeling a little bit better. But if this continually happens, this will leave the person who's making the repair attempt feeling like, what's the point? And the more this goes on, the harder it's going to get to come back from this too. So that's a warning sign. So again, this is a chance for you to actually start talking and saying, look, when you're in a better place, that is, look, when I do try and make repair attempts, but you just don't seem to listen, or you don't seem to notice, or you don't seem to respond. Yeah.
So when you look at the Australian Bureau of Statistics on divorce rates in Australia, the number one cause of divorce is actually communication. The number one given when people fill in their court papers or whatever it is, the number one cause for divorce is communication.
Yeah, that's true. So the last sign, which is we're looking at all the negatives first, but anyway, the last one is bad memories. So when a relationship is struggling, sometimes it's all the bad stuff that's brought up. So it's like, oh yeah, that always happens, or, these are whenever we have an argument, I remember that argument we had, and I still haven't forgiven you for that. These are the things that might get brought up. Or, you did something in the office and I just can't forgive you. Whenever you get angry, that's when you start to remember all the bad things. So trying to turn that around, instead of bad memories, try and think about the good things, because there must be good things. You're friends, you're in love, you're in a relationship, so there must be good things. So instead of the bad memories, turn it around, think about the good memories. How can you turn it back? All right.
I think sometimes when we meet couples that are going through a tough season, when we talk to them about, when they first met and their first date, and just even, they've not even talked about that for a long time, but even those simple conversations, just reminding ourselves, what did I value in Wendy when I first met her? What did I love about her as I got to know her? And just reminding ourselves of that.
I have great memories, like talking to couples. We see a lot of couples maybe going through a difficult season. And when you actually sit with them, there is conflict. There's no doubt about it, and we're working through that. But when you actually ask them, how did you meet? Or what was your first date? And it's amazing the difference in their face, their expression. They actually soften, and because they're having memories of happy times. And it's like, so if you're feeling tension and it's okay, this is a good time to bring up, like some of the good things, some of the happy moments in your lives as well. All right, let's move on to slide 7. We're going to look at enhancing your love map. So that's principle 1. So we're going to work our way up to principle 7. So love maps or friendship maps, because obviously this is not just for married couples, but it's for friends. And of course you love your friends as well. So we're talking here about getting to know each other, aren't we? We're talking here about finding out about each other, and not just the surface stuff, but the deep stuff. So things like having conversations. We love to go for walks, don't we? And this is when we talk the most. We go out for walks. I mentioned something the other day about card decks, which is, Gottman has this little app that you can download. It's free. And in it, there's lots of questions, open-ended questions. There's other things on the market as well. And it's little questions that you can, together, and again, anything, relationship, friendships, married couples, or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. These questions are quite general, and things like, if you could design your own house, what would it look like? Starting, big questions like that, or even knowing what each other's favorite color is or favorite flower is, because you don't know unless you ask. And the whole point of enhancing your love map is getting to know each other deeply. Have you got anything to add? I know I've got a scripture here, actually.
Yeah.
So
I think like at the heart of every good relationship and good marriage is fondness and admiration.
yeah.
And so what these dreaming conversations do, you get to dream together, you get to imagine together, you get to even just pretend and play together of what we would love to do. And in that place, it really enhances that intimacy, that fondness, that admiration. And that brings this sense that when we do hit a crisis, we have something in the bank to draw on. Yeah. And if we don't do that intentionally, when we get to the place that we have a crisis, there's nothing in the bank. And we've got nothing to call on. So that intentional week after week after week of sowing into our marriage, of having these conversations, of making date night happen. And date night for me is not the movies. I mean, that doesn't mean don't go to the movies, but movies isn't date night. Date night is when you sit and dream together and talk about things that you love to talk about. You don't talk about who's doing the groceries and who's picking the kids up. That's transactional conversation. You talk about dreams and things you'd love to do in the future and things you might never do. But in that place, you just have this great connection, soul connection, really, that builds this trust and fondness and admiration that's right at the heart that protects you as you go in. Because you'll go through storms, but it gives you something to anchor you as you go through the storms.
It's good. And you're covering principle 2 as well here, because that's nurtured, which is great, because they lead into each other. Enhancing your love map, your friendship map leads into nurturing your fondness and admiration. So that's slide 2, if you want to show that one. But the scriptures, do you want to? Yeah.
We have a scripture for the first one there, which is from Psalms 139, 1 and 2. God, investigate my life, get all the facts firsthand. I am an open book to you, even from a distance, you know what I'm thinking. So that's Psalm 139, 1 and 2. So what I would love you to do is just in pairs or threes, talk just to each other for a minute about that scripture and what it means to you right now.
Yep. I'll read it out again. So it's God, investigate my life, get all the facts firsthand. I'm an open book to you, even from a distance, you know what I'm thinking. So thinking about in context of relationships here. So that's 139, 1 to 2, Psalms. All right. Did you get something from that? Just thinking about when we're working through the principles and we're going to share the scripture with each principle, it's just to think about, well, what's God saying to you? We're hoping that this is what you're going to remember more than what we're sharing with you, because we want to, we think about our relationships, and it's like when we trust God with our relationships, that we trust that He's going to help us with our everything in it, and that's who we turn to when we're in trouble. That's who we turn to when we're in need. So that's why I thought it'd be good to share the scripture and have some time, reflecting on that as well. All right. Do you want to talk about the next one?
All right, yeah. Principle 3, turn towards each other instead of away. And I think this is, each of them is sort of hierarchical. The principles build on each other as they go. And I think this one really is, we can turn physically away from somebody, but we can also turn psychologically or emotionally away from somebody. So it's really important that with the people that we want to be close to, friends, people in our business, in our marriage, that we understand what that does when we turn away from people and remind ourselves to turn towards people. And that's an intentional thing. It's not something we do necessarily because it feels good in the moment, but it's something we do because we're intentionally building trust. I think about if you had a trust menu, what would you put on the menu? If you were trying to build trust with somebody else and you were thinking, I'm going to write this recipe for trust, this would be on it, that I'm going to turn towards people when they're struggling, and I'm going to turn towards them to help them. I'm not going to allow their attitude to cause me to turn away. Does that make sense?
So the scripture here is Luke 6:31. Do to others as you would have them do to you. And do you want to do the same again? Spend a bit of time?
Yeah, just 2 minutes in your pairs or threes. What does that mean for you? What examples and anecdotes could you tell about when you've done something for somebody that you wished that they would do for you, that others would do for you?
Yeah. So Luke 6:31. Do to others as you would have them do to you. Okay. We're going to come back now. So, we've got some good conversations going here, which is great. So what we're going to do now, we're going to jump ahead and do a game first, and then we're going to come. But before I do that, Angela, that under your seat, could you maybe hand these out to everyone? And there's some pens there as well. We're going to do a little game here, which I'd like you to do if you're in couples or groups or whatever you're comfortable with. But it's called, and I don't know if anyone's ever done this before, it's the Gottman Island Survival Game. So the reason why we're doing this now, because Principle 4, so if we jump to slide 10, which doesn't matter about that. Stay where we are at the island game. Principle 4 is let your partner or your friend influence you. So the whole point of this game is to actually, you're going to imagine that your cruise, this is all on the paper, so I'm just going to read it out to explain it, but you're going to imagine that your cruise ship has just sunk in the Caribbean, and you awaken to find yourself on a deserted island. There's only a couple of you as survivors, or 3 of you, or whoever. It says 2, but you can improvise. One of you is injured. You have no idea where you are. You think there's some chance that people know of the ship's distress, but you're not sure. A storm appears to be on the way. You decide that you need to prepare to survive on this island for some time, and also to make sure you'll be spotted by a rescue party. So there's a bunch of stuff on from the ship on the beach that could help you, but you can only carry 10 items. So on page 2 is a list of ship's inventory that are found on the beach. But what I need you to do is to think about what items do you need to survive. So between you, I'd like you to work out what you think you need. Now, there's no right or wrong answers here, but what we're trying to do is, in couples or groups, work out what you think you might need to survive. So we'll give you...
So you can practice your reflective,
Yeah.
your assertiveness and your reflective listening on this exercise.
Yeah, okay.
No flooding. You're already on the beach.
We'll finish up. Feel free to finish this up afterwards as well.
And we're back.
And we're back. So the purpose of this game, because we're doing principle 4, let your partner or your friend influence you. This is like we're trying to work out from doing this, and you'll see it in your paperwork. There's obviously a little survey you can do if you want later on. But if you're having difficulty accepting influence, you will benefit your marriage enormously by acknowledging this tendency and talking. So your marriage or relationship. So with this principle, we're looking at how influenced can you be? Are you very stuck in your ways that you're not willing to take advice from anyone, from your friend, your wife, your husband? So it's something to think about. So by picking what goes into your emergency packs, did you discuss it? Did you hands up if you felt you just did it by yourself, or did you do it as a team? Hands up if you did it by yourself. You did it as a team. Well done. Well done. I like to hear that. So there was good discussions going on, was there? Did anyone feel like they just weren't happy with what the other person was? Oh, no, maybe we shouldn't go there. I take it you were all happy. We'll not go there, will we?
Was there anybody flooding? Do you need any help?
Did anyone turn away from their friend?
Share one little thing. Tom and I nailed it because we watched Naked and Afraid. Has anybody seen Naked and Afraid? It's good. It's pixelated. Don't worry. But it's trained us for tonight. We felt like we dominated.
Perfect. Thank you, Angela. I love that. We're going to all have to watch Naked and Afraid now. Okay, can we pop... I'm sorry to move you around at the back, but could we go back to slide 11 for the next one, Principle 5? And we're going to look at solving your solvable problems. Now, I'm just wanting to share here Romans 12:18 before we start. If possible, as far as it depends on you, to live at peace with everyone. So, solve your solvable problems. Manage, when we're trying to manage conflict, it's better saying manage than resolve, because we might never be able to resolve it 100%. I think we try and use the term manage it because it's a little bit easier, because resolving... conflict is good sometimes as well, actually, isn't it? It's good to have healthy conflict.
If you have trust, you can have healthy conflict. Yeah. So healthy conflict's good. It's unhealthy conflict that's not good. And we know from Gottman that 64% of all disagreements in a marriage are not fully resolvable to the full satisfaction of both people. So there has to be some give and take. There has to be we've got a good example of that, haven't we? On birthdays.
Oh, yes. I think you should tell that story about the birthday. Yeah.
So when we got married, Wendy was brought up in a beautiful family three siblings, four kids, and the mum and dad. Dad's a policeman, mum's a nurse, and they made big deal of the special days. Didn't have a lot of money, but they, like birthdays would go for 3 days, and everybody would be celebrating. And they made a big deal of it, and all the kids experienced that growing up. I was brought up in a series of children's homes, and we didn't really do birthdays. And so when we got married, my understanding, I'd never given anybody a card, I think, in my life at that point. And Wendy was constantly sending people cards, and she's got like 3,000 relatives. And there was constantly birthdays, and we'd have a birthday that would be on the Saturday because that's when we could do it, but it would be on the actual birthday day as well. So everybody would have 2 days for their birthday, and I didn't get it. I honestly didn't get it. So we had, well, you could call it tension, I guess, at that point between us. And I think that we're talking about something here that Gottman calls the dream behind the conflict. So the conflict for us was, I didn't think we should be spending as much and taking as much time over birthdays. I didn't really value birthdays the way that Wendy valued them. So we had this conflict. But the dream behind the conflict was when I really understood something about Wendy that I didn't really know at that time. So I started to understand that for Wendy, birthdays connected her back to her childhood. That when she had the birthday celebration with our kids, she was remembering all the great times she had as a kid. She was reliving that. She was honouring her mum, honouring her dad, honouring the way that she'd been raised. And there was this huge dream behind the conflict for her. So the conflict itself wasn't the issue. What was the issue was the dream behind the conflict. And so once I got that, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm so willing to give ground here. I love Wendy, and I don't want her ever to think that I would do something to her. So as soon as I got the dream behind the conflict, it made sense to me, and I went, oh yeah, let's. So now I'm the big birthday guy. Yeah. I'm full in it now.
You're actually more into it than I am now. It puts me to shame now. So good, yeah, clap. Well done, Allan. Well done. Did you mention that 1 year you forgot to say happy birthday?
No,
to
I didn't
me?
mention that.
No, okay, that's where it all sort of started. But you know, it was like that brought a little bit of tension in our house that day.
I went out in the morning, and I genuinely had stuff to do at night for a birthday, but I left in the morning without saying happy birthday. But to honestly, and this sounds a bit defensive, but that was my worldview at the time, that birthdays weren't that important.
Yeah, but we're okay now. We celebrate birthdays. That's good. Okay, so you've kind of good. I love the fact that he's watching the clock here, and we don't want to run over our time. So he's actually gone into the next principle with dreams behind the conflict, because the next principle is number 6. I'm not going to go into big detail on these because I feel like there's so much information. You need to go through lectures to understand, like to really go through it all. So the next one is overcoming gridlock. So we've kind of covered that as well, because again, we're going back to communication, aren't we? We're going back to healthy communication as well. And we're talking about the dream behind the conflict. So when a relationship is in gridlock, when there's conflict, when there's just no, it feels like, you know what gridlock is? There's just no moving, it's stuck. And sometimes we get into that place when we're disagreeing about things or things that are happening. So the dream behind the conflict is a great way to actually look at that. Is there a reason why they just don't like doing that? Is there a reason why this is making them really upset? So this is maybe something to think about. And these are like just little things to go away with and think, well, maybe we should talk. Maybe if I ask them a little bit more about why, because they might not even realize themselves until you actually start talking. And I don't think I even realized it was because of how I felt about birthdays that got me so upset. I think I was just really upset because you didn't say happy birthday. But you know what? It's okay. We were okay. We were still in a good place. But it actually did help us talk about why. You know, it actually helped us go a bit deeper. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think because it goes to core values.
Yeah.
Really, it's not so much what we're doing, it's what we value.
You're really keen to talk about core values, aren't you? Go on. He loves core values.
I love core values. I think everybody should know what their core values are.
We're leading on to 7, by the way. If you want to jump onto number 7, you keep going.
So I think like most of us will carry in our life at least 5 core values, 5 things that. And now, it's not an intention. So your core value is not what you'd like to be. It's what you actually are. So if you do an audit on your life, just imagine you sit and you write down for 2 or 3 weeks how you spend your time. Then you'll see what you value. If you look at what you spend most time on, that's where your value is. And that's really where your core values sit then, in that place. So aligning our core values is really important. As a young boy in Scotland, I was often in the Highland Games. And the last event in the Highland Games was always the tug of war. And I was always the anchor man for my village, Glenfinnan, in the tug of war. And I learned something really valuable at that time, was that it wasn't really necessary to be the heaviest team or even the strongest team. What was really important was keeping the rope straight. As soon as the rope had a bend in it, you were actually pulling against your own team. So you had to put as much work into keeping the rope straight as you did pulling. So really, to get momentum, we need alignment. That's the principle. So if we're not aligned with our core values, it's very difficult to get momentum in life. And we find ourselves like there's tension. We don't know why, don't really enjoy this. I'm not really flourishing. I'm not really bringing my best. Often the question goes back to, what's your core value? Are you living those core values out in this place? Not only just what's your core values, but unpack them. What are they and what are they not? Because knowing the boundaries on your core values, often we get way over the boundary before we recognize there's a problem. But we should have early warning systems to go, hold on, this is the first sign that I'm drifting from my core value here, and that should bring me back in line again.
That's great. And I think we kind of finish up here with principle 7. We're going to finish up with something else, but creating shared meaning. So your core values, you might have different core values. That's okay, because, you know, we do an exercise sometimes with actually finding out what your core values are. They're usually similar, but, you know, we're quite different. Is that a surprise? You know, we're quite different. So we're looking at, but creating a shared meaning is not about being the same, but having something in common, something that you believe in. And I'm thinking, even we're talking about ritual here. This is not like weird kind of stuff. It's things like a ritual is having dinner together at the table and not sitting in front of the TV with the news on and not talking, but actually sitting at the table, communicating, talking to each other, or in the tea room at work, instead of just sitting at your laptop, eating your lunch, going and sitting together and having lunch together, because it's actually I'm making it a ritual, making it a habit. The roles we play in our lives influence our place in society as well. So with our relationships, our perspectives on our role and our partner or friend can create tension or bring harmony and meaning as well. And this obviously will bring satisfaction as well. So again, our roles are really important, and into sharing our goals, again, thinking about, well, what are our goals? What are our, what's our hopes for the future? What's it we want to be doing in 10 years' time? Or, what's things that we can think about together? And the shared values and symbols, again, it's like our belief system. As a couple, it might be the fact that you pray together, or as friends, you just pray. That's a belief system, is that you choose to meet or over breakfast and have a prayer in the morning, or you meet once a week and you do your devotions together, whatever it is, but it's having shared values and symbols. So these are like creating shared meaning. This is something that you're working constantly on. And most of these principles, the first 3 are, as we talked about them, if you're strong in those, that's a really good sign. But sometimes when we get to further down and there's conflict and gridlock, and I do want to say too, if somebody or if couples, say there are couples here or friendships here that are just, you're struggling, get help, speak to someone. You know, we've got pastors, there's great counseling for relationships, for psychology as well. There's lots of support out there. So don't do it alone. You know, if somebody is struggling or they're going through a tough season and they do want to talk to someone, I would really recommend that you do, because I always think, sharing, talking, and having it in the right environment, a safe space as well. All right, we're coming up to the end. We're just going to finish up we'll just jump to the last slide, if that's okay. That's slide 22, I think. And it's an exercise in Thanksgiving. So we're going to end with this. So step 1, focus on so thinking about, go into your groups again, if it's couples, if it's like groups of friends. But do it for now. This is something that we want to encourage you to do every day. But if you could just do this now. Like, focus on what's going right. Offer at least one genuine, heartfelt praise each day, or just do it now. Praise each other now. It's okay to do that now. But I want your homework really is to keep extending this. Do this daily if you can with each other as a friendship as well. Sending a text to say, oh man, that was so good to see you last night, or your hair's looking really good today, or I love your outfit, whatever, just something nice is really good, just to encourage each other. Yeah. Are you going to say something else?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, one of the great habits that we have is at the end of the day, we have 2 or 3 minutes together where we debrief and where it's Wendy and I against the world. So, or me with Wendy together. She listens to my day, and it doesn't matter if I've stuffed up, and it's all my fault. She's going to champion me at that point, and the same for Wendy, that I'll champion her. So we get that at the end of our day, and we can do this as friends or as married couples, and then we can leave that now. We can leave that at the kitchen bench, and we can move into our night. We've dealt with the day, we've championed each other, and we can move on from there.
Yeah. All right, take a couple of minutes and exercise in Thanksgiving, and then we'll finish up. Okay? All right, wind up now. Yeah. All right, I think we're going to wind up now, and we're going to ask them. Has anyone got some questions? I think we have one question here. I'll come up to you, and All right. Okay, we'll share the mic.
Okay, here we go.
How do you handle a partner that has totally opposing values? Say they don't believe in God and you are passionate about God. It's totally different values. Yeah. They started off in a different place, but they've moved into developed into different places. So their values have changed through 30 years. How do you deal with that?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think I'm just joking.
I'm going to say something too, but I want you to.
All right. I think it's a great question, and there's not an easy answer to it. It's not like this. Here's one sentence, and that'll fix everything. But I think, like, first of all, might need to get some help. Go to somebody, get a third party involved that's skilled in this area, that can help you in this area. And also, like, I think with harmony, what we look for is we look to see what do we agree on, and we focus there. We build from there. So, okay, there'll be some things we don't agree on, and maybe they're pretty important, but there'll be other things we do agree on. Let's try and land them. I think often of circle of influence and circle of concern. So I draw myself 2 circles like a donut, and in the whole, I write everything I can do. So I can pray for people. I can buy somebody a coffee. I can care for my wife. I can fill the car with petrol. There's a whole lot of things I can do. And in my circle of concern, I write down all the things I'm worried about that I can do nothing about. And then I choose where I'm going to live. I'm going to live in my circle of concern. It gets bigger and bigger and squeezes out my circle of influence. But if I choose to live in my circle of influence, it gets bigger and bigger and squeezes out my circle of concern. So I'm going to have to choose, even in the toughest seasons, to do what I can faithfully, trust God for the things I can't do, and then get help where it's needed.
Yeah, no,
Say, Al, oh, sorry, you going to answer that?
Yeah, I wanted him to answer because I wanted him to talk about that as well, circle of concern. But I support a lot of women as well, and we support men and women. And that's come up a lot. You know, how, say one partner or one person's believer and the other person is maybe changed or not anymore or has never been. The thing I normally say to people is, you know what you can do is, Alan's already mentioned it, is just pray for them. And I know it's not just because prayer is so important, but also the more, and this is, I have to say this carefully, it's like your fruit from what they see from you, and without putting too much pressure on them to change, that's going to push them away. Actually, by accepting them for who they are and what their beliefs are right now, but trusting God, handing it over, giving it to God, and saying to God, I need you to help me here. I need you to step in here. I need you to do something in his life right now, or their life right now. And, just say to God, I need your help right now. So that would be my encouragement right now. Okay.
Very good. And we're going to pray before we go tonight anyway for all the relationships before we leave tonight. But a question that was fielded was, Alan, you talked about core values. You're really big on core values, which I am myself. So we have a lot of singles here. And what were some of the core values you had when you were dating Wendy, just to keep yourself in line with what's in your heart?
Yeah, I think, well, obviously core values were that we were going to stay, we weren't going to have sex before we got married. We committed, we dated for 5 years. So I was 42 when we got married. I honestly thought I was the perfect guy at that point. What a surprise I was in for. But yeah, I think we chose to really work on our friendship. We decided to be friends, to work through some issues that we needed to work through, not to be in a rush to get anywhere. Wendy had 2 children, 2 small children from a previous marriage, so it was a big decision we were making. I was going to become a stepdad, and then that whole sense of staying pure, if you like, until we were ready to get married was really important to us. To have regular date nights, to be friends, to spend time together, and to be careful in that place.
Yeah, I know, and that it was something that was really important because obviously both of us were not like just out of school. We were both mature. I'd been married before, so obviously I wasn't, but we made a commitment as a couple that we were going to wait until we got married. We didn't live together. We stayed in separate houses. We used to hang out together, but we had to have really strong boundaries too, because you're a human being. You have feelings. You have things will. So I'm being open and honest here, but you actually have to you make a decision to wait. It's really important, and I think it's the best thing that we ever did was wait till we got married. And we made that as our commitment to each other, to wait. And actually, we focused on there was a time in our relationship when we were dating that we actually broke up because there was sort of tension, because I think Allan thought that I heard from God that I was going to marry him, and it freaked him out a bit because he hadn't heard from God that he was going to marry me. So, and I'm like, Allan, I'm not trying to tell you that we're going to get married. Anyway, that's another story, but it kind of went. So, but I do remember God saying to me, you need to actually put me first and not Allan. And I remember we actually separated for a few months. And it was a hard time because I really loved him and I really hoped and thought we would get married. But I actually we had to stop seeing each other for me to not put Allan first, but to put God first, because I was a relatively new Christian as well. And I was still thinking that Allan was more important than anything else. But actually, I had to put God first. So I remember that season of separating, putting God first. And then it was like, I don't know what happened, but you went away to America on a holiday and you came back and suddenly he was chasing me. He was wanting to marry me at that point. So I'm like, but I think it's because I put God first. I didn't put Allan first. So I want to encourage you, if you're in a new relationship or you're a fairly new Christian, remember who should be number one in your life. And I actually really want to encourage you that God should be number one in your life.
Amen. All right. One last question. Do you want to ask the question, Angela, or you want to give it to someone else? One last question. Amherst, do you want to ask a question? You're representing all the female humanity of Macquarie.
No pressure. I can't think of a question, to be honest.
Stage fright. Anyone else? Oh, well, Angela, why don't you come up to the platform? Let's give a hand to these guys. It was amazing.